birth of Sawyer James. And so if you haven't seen the Facebook pictures, don't worry. Randy's got 200 on his phone that he is ready to show you at a moment's notice. So I will say this, Sawyer's got some good hair. So got some good hair. All right, go ahead and be opening up to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles, chapter 15. History tells us that most nations and most people don't fall during times of crisis, but rather they fall after success. Now, that almost seems like kind of strange to think about, right? Like you would expect people to fall in moments of crisis, not when they've experienced success. Why do you think it is that, according to history, that's when most great nations, even people, fall? When they're on top of the world, when they're having all this success? Pride. Pride is a good one. What?
Pride and arrogance.
Pride and arrogance.
God, it's all about me. Look what I've done. Look what I accomplished.
Okay, look at me. Look what I've accomplished. Okay, they become very self-confident. Okay. I've always often thought about that when I read history and I read about these great empires, and most of them don't crumble because of outside forces, but they crumble because of the inside, because of things that take place on the inside with pride and arrogance and so forth. But when I was thinking about, I'm obviously a big sports fan, and right now, I don't know about you guys, but we're watching the Winter Olympics. And that may mean nothing to you. You may not care about that at all. I'm kind of into curling. I don't really understand it, but it looks cool. It looks fun. My boys and I have played it at the house some. Don't ask how you do that. That's a picture in and of itself. But we enjoy the Winter Olympics. And some of you, most of you, I would say in this auditorium tonight, are old enough to remember the Winter Olympics of 1980. And you, if you follow sports at all, you probably know what happened in 1980. What happened? Who can tell me? All right, the Miracle on Ice, as it's called, right? U.S. hockey beat the Soviet Union in basically the semifinal match. They would go on to beat Finland and to win the gold medal. But what's interesting about that is called that is the #1 greatest upset of all time. It is considered to be, it was the most historic upset of the 20th century. There's been a movie about it, right? Books, articles have been written about this event. But what's interesting about it, and of course, I wasn't born in 1980, so I saw it later. But, learning about it, that wasn't a slam on you who were born in 1980. I realized after I said that, I probably shouldn't have said that. I probably shouldn't have said that, should I? So, what? Okay, you keep going. What was I going to say with that? 1980. Oh, yes. So what's interesting about it is when you learn the history of what happened. I'm not a big hockey fan, but I know about the Miracle on Ice. What made it such a major upset was the Soviet Union was led by a lot of older players, a lot of professional players, guys that had professional experience, whereas the Americans were led by a bunch of amateurs. They were led by guys that didn't have professional experience. The U.S. was the youngest team in that tournament. So no one expected the U.S. to win the tournament, much less upset the Soviet Union. But what's interesting is four Olympics prior to 1980, the Soviet Union was the gold medalist for men's hockey. They had won it 4 straight Olympics. They'd won, I think, is either 5 out of the last 6 or 6 out of the last 7 Olympic gold medals in hockey. So nobody expected them to lose. So when they took the ice that day against the young Americans, guess what? They didn't think there was any chance in the world the Americans could beat them. And what happened? Man, they pulled the greatest upset of all time. Because sometimes when you're successful and you've had a lot of success, pride can get in the way. And pride goes before the fall, right? Before destruction. Complacency can get in the way, and it can cause you to stumble. In the text that we're going to look at tonight, there's a warning that's going to come to a king, and it's going to come at a time when when everything's going well for the king. Okay, it's not like he's in the middle of a crisis at this moment. He's actually experiencing great success. So we pick up in 2 Chronicles, chapter 15, beginning in verse 1. And we read about the prophet. It says, the Spirit of God came upon Azariah, the son of Oded. So the prophet Azariah. Now this is the prophet that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. There are 28 different men with the name Azariah in the Old Testament. That's one of those popular names. And they served in a lot of different roles and a lot of different, some of them were officials, like you had one that was named Azariah that was an official to Solomon in Solomon's court. Azariah is the name of another name for the 10th king of Judah, Uzziah. You've got another one that helped to basically take down Athaliah. So this was a pretty popular name, okay? But this Azariah is a guy who's the son, it says, of Oded. And he ministers during the reign of King Asa. King Asa was the third king of the southern kingdom of Judah. And this is the only place that you read about Azariah, okay? At least this Azariah, okay? So his name means the Lord has helped. And so the Spirit of the Lord is going to come upon him. And verse 2 tells us he went out to meet Asa. Now, I want to stop there because in order to understand the significance of chapter 15 and the prophecy of Azariah, what Azariah is going to say on behalf of God to Asa, you really have to go backwards. And you have to look at the background of what is taking place. So basically, you have to go back to chapter 14. And in chapter 14, if your Bible has a heading, it says something along the lines of Asa reigns in Judah, right? Or Asa becomes king. And here's what I want you to notice about Asa. The Bible tells us, beginning in verse 1, that he takes over for his father Abijah, and he reigned in his place, and the land had rest for 10 years. And Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. So as it opens up, we get this picture right off the bat of who King Asa is, and we're told, hey, Asa's a good king, okay? Now, we've talked about this before in our class when we're talking about the prophets. You're talking about the kings that reigned over Israel. You've got the southern kingdom. You've got the northern kingdom. You've got, 19 kings basically in each. In the northern kingdom, how many kings were good? How many kings of Israel were good? None. A big goose egg. They were all corrupt. When you get to the southern kingdom, it's a little different. There was a little glimmer of hope with the southern kingdom because you had a few kings who were good. Now, you still had many who weren't. But you had a few who were really good kings. And then you had some maybe who were good kings who started off really well. Asa is one of these guys. He started off really well, but their ending wasn't so great. You've got a few other kings who started out pretty corrupt, pretty badly, and they actually repent. I think about somebody like Manasseh, who reigned for 55 years and was a pretty corrupt king, a pretty bad king, but he repents. And so you've got this broad spectrum of these different people who are reigning, but we're told off the bat, okay, Asa does what's right in the eyes of God. And notice what it tells us that Asa is doing here, okay? Go back to verse 1 first. The Bible tells us that there's rest in the land for 10 years. What's that mean? Everybody just sleeping all the time?
No wars, just peace, conflict.
Okay, there's no wars, there's no conflicts, there's peace, okay? What's significant about that? Okay, they always seem to be at war, so this is kind of unusual. Yeah, there's a lot of war that you read about, especially when you're reading about the kings, right? Okay, really, our problems go back from not obeying God when we went into the land to begin with, right? We didn't drive out the inhabitants of the land, and they're going to be a thorn in our side, so to speak, for pretty much the remainder of our days. But for this point in time, they have rest. And notice what Asa does. Verse 3, He took away the foreign altars and the high places and broke down the pillars and cut down the Asherim. When it talks about the high places, what's it talking about here? Okay, altars to foreign gods. Yeah, a lot of the high places is where they would have these altars that would be built, and that's where especially these pagan kings, pagan people would go and they would worship, they would sacrifice to their God. So Asa, one of the things that he does, he goes in and it says he begins to do away with these altars, these high places. He breaks down these pillars that have significance, these statues, so to speak. Look at verse 4. What's verse 4 tell us he does? He what? He commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to keep his law, to keep the law and to keep the commandments, right? So he comes on the scene. He's doing away with the idolatry. He is encouraging the people, hey, we got to seek after God. That would be a good thing to do, right? You're God's people after all, right? So we want to seek after God. And hey, oh yeah, remember the law that God gave us? What do we need to do with it? We need to obey it, right? And verse 5 tells us that basically he's going to, he took all the cities and the high places, the incense altars, the kingdom, it says, the end of verse 5, has rest under him. He builds these fortified cities, and there's no war in these years. So for 10 years, Asa is doing really well. He's been pretty faithful to God, and the land is at rest. But then you get to verse 8. In verse 8, you read about Asa's army. Now, I want you to think about this. Asa, it says, has an army of 300,000 from Judah who are armed with large spears and shields. And there's 280,000 men from Benjamin who carry shields and drew bows, and they were mighty men of valor. I'm not the best at math, but I think that's like 580,000 fighting men, right? Okay, that's a pretty significant army, right? Especially for the southern kingdom at this point in time, I would think. The problem is when you get to verse 9 and you read about Azariah, the Ethiopian, who comes out against them, and it says as he comes out against them, it says, depending on your translations say he may have an army of 1,000,000 men with 300 chariots, or yours may say thousands upon thousands. And some people think, well, okay, why does it say thousands upon thousands from some, and why do some translations say 1,000,000? Well, because in the Hebrew, it literally reads 1,000,000. And so some people think, well, what that means is it's 1,000 times 1,000, right? So whatever it is, the picture, whether it's 1,000,000 or it's just thousands upon thousands upon thousands, the idea is that the army of Asa is what? The army of Asa, of Judah, the people of Judah, their army is what? Smaller compared to the Ethiopians, right? Basically, they're outnumbered. So if you take it and say, okay, there's 1,000,000 and there's Judah has 580,000, it's not quite 2 times, but almost 2 times as many people who are fighting for the Ethiopians. So they come out to do battle against Judah. And look at verse 11. Verse 11 tells us the response of Asa, because Asa here, it says, cried out to the Lord his God, O Lord, there's none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we've come up with multitude. O Lord, you are our God, and prevail against you. You see what's happening with Asa here? His army is outnumbered, and where is his dependence? It's on God, right? He's showing who he's depending on. God, we're outnumbered here, right? Like, this is not going to be a fair fight. We're not going to last very long. But Lord, he says, for we rely on you, and we've come in your name. Let no man prevail against you. God, we may be outnumbered, but we know what you can do. We trust you. And verse 12 says, so the Lord defeated the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. And going to go in and plunder the Ethiopians and the cities around the area and so forth. So basically, you get this picture. After he relies on God, prays to God, God gives him the victory, right? And notice it says who gets credit for the victory. In verse 12, who's the first person mentioned? The Lord is, right? Don't get it wrong. It's the Lord who's caused this victory to take place, okay? Asa understands that. Asa's the one who cried out to God in this moment, okay? That's the background, okay? Then you get into chapter 15. We're coming off this great success, this great victory. But what happens when people experience victory? Maybe we get a little cocky, we get a little prideful, we get a little complacent. Maybe we begin to become a little more self-reliant. And so the prophet Azariah goes to meet Asa. And I want you to notice what he says in verse 2. He says, "Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin." So I'm speaking to you, king, yes, but I'm speaking to all the people, okay? You hear me. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. Azariah comes on the scene, and the first thing you see is he encourages Asa and the people to continue seeking God. Now, this is how Asa's reign started, right? He started seeking the Lord, and Asa did, and Asa commanded the people, hey, we need to seek God, and we need to keep his law. We need to keep his commandments. 10 years, things are good. We finally have a war. We're probably feeling good about ourselves. And Azariah comes on, and he says, hey, you got to keep seeking God. But notice what he tells them about following God, about seeking God. What will happen? The Lord is with you when? Yeah, the Lord is with you when you're with him. But when you're not with him, he won't be with you. So if you seek him, he will be found. Now, that's a verse that, you read about it later in Jeremiah. Jeremiah talks about, if you seek the Lord, you will find him. If you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. The Lord says that. Jesus talks about it in Matthew 7, right? Seek and you will find, right? This idea of seeking and finding is biblical, right? It's repeated throughout the Testament, Old and New Testament. But notice what he says. He says, if you seek him, you will find him. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. In other words, the faithfulness, or rather your faithfulness, right, will dictate whether or not God's going to bless you, right? Your faithfulness will dictate whether or not God is going to be with you. Ultimately, whether God is going to make you successful. So here's what you have to do. You have to continue to seek him. Question. How do you seek God? Through his word? Through prayer? Through trust? Okay, through following him? You ever heard somebody say, I'm seeking the Lord? Now, when they say that, what do they mean? I'm looking for him. I'm trying to find him. I need him in my life. But how do you seek God? You just walk out the doors of the building. Where are you, God? I'm looking for you. You out here, God? Is that what it means to seek God? You look in your heart? Ooh, Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. That's good. All right, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. Yeah, the idea of seeking you think about like in our context, for this context, obviously you go back to what Asa said in chapter 14, right? We want to seek God and we want to obey his law. That's how you seek God. You follow God, right? For us today, if we want to seek out God, we have to look to God's word. And if we want to be the kind of people who, the Lord is with us when we're with him, what's it mean to be with the Lord for us today? You're with the Lord if you do what? Okay, if you trust him, but also if you obey him, right? That's what makes you with the Lord. So Azariah says, okay, here's what you got to do. You got to continue to see God. And if you don't continue to seek God, if you forsake God, then God's going to forsake you. That's the first thing he says. Now, notice the next thing here. He's going to remind the people of the nation's history. Look at verse 3. He says, for a long time, Israel was without the true God and without a teaching priest and without the law. Now, think about that. For a long time, Israel was without the true God, without a teaching priest, and they were out without the law. What do those three things add up to? No, you don't have the true God, you don't have a teaching priest, and you don't have the law. What's that going to add up to? Lots and lots of trouble. Worldliness, okay, yeah. Lots of trouble, right? Lots of shame. Now, there's some debate. What is exactly we're talking about Israel's history here, okay? So what part of Israel's history is he talking about? Is he basically talking about all of Israel's history? Could be. I mean, that would sum up most of their history. Or is he focusing in on a specific period of time? Think about the time of the judges, for instance. What was it like in the time of the judges? It was very chaotic. Yeah. 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 I call it the cycle of chaos, right? They're obedient to God. They start following false gods. They turn their back on God. God raises up an enemy, an oppressor. They oppress the people. The people cry out to God. God, we're sorry. God, we need you. God raises up a deliverer. He delivers the people. There's a period of rest. Start it all over again. That's the story of the Judges over and over. And you see it when you read the chapter 2 of Judges. It basically talks about that whole idea. That's what it was like for the whole period of the Judges. But the problem with Judges, in the time period of the Judges, is the summary of Judges is given in the very last verse. When it says, for there was no king in Israel, but every man did what? What was right in his own eyes. That's the time period. They're not following God. There is no teaching priests, right? There's no priest worried about teaching the law because nobody's obeying the law because everybody's doing what they want to do. So he gives this reminder, hey, remember the history of the people. Right now, he just told him, if you seek God, you will find him. If you're faithful to God, he'll be faithful to you. If you forsake him, he's going to forsake you. Just look back at your history. Look back at the history of our nation. Verse 4. But when in their distress, they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and he was found by them. I love that passage, that idea. Right? They were in distress. That's the story of the Judges, right? They cry out to God. They search for God. They seek out God. And guess what happens? You find him. That's a promise. God says, if you search for me with all your heart, you'll find me. There's grace here. There's a measure of grace and mercy that is seen here. And you see it when you look at the history of God's people and the way that God blessed them, okay? So he reminds them of their history. Verse 6 says they were broken in pieces. The nation was crushed by nation, city by city. For God troubled them with every sort of distress, right? Raising up these oppressors. Now look at verse 7. But you take courage and do not let your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded. All right? So he comes on the scene and he encourages them, hey, you got to keep seeking God. Got to continue to follow him. If you seek him, you'll find him. If you forsake him, he'll forsake you. Look back at your history. Remember what it was like for God's people when they didn't follow God. There was no teaching priest. There was no law being followed. Remember what life was like. But when you look for God, when you turn to God in your distress, God's going to be there. And then you get to verse 7, and he rallies the people here. He rallies the people to be courageous and to not give up. Now, he's speaking to the king, but he's also speaking to the people, to all of Judah and all of Benjamin. And there's this rally here, right? He says, you take courage and don't let your hands be weak. Literally, don't let your hands fall down. That's what it is. That's what it means. Don't give up, and your work will be rewarded. What do you think he's encouraging them to do at this point? Do things God's way? Well, yeah. So when you think about this, all this is coming on the heels of war, right? We've been out to battle, we've been successful, and now, hey, we've talked about reminding of all seek God, he's going to be there, all these things that we've just talked about, and now, hey, you got to be courageous and just don't grow weary. Don't let your hands fall. Don't give up. He's not talking about battle. At least he's not talking about physical battle. I believe what he's talking about is the spiritual reforms that need to take place. Because when Asa's ministry started, Asa goes in, Asa does what is right in the sight of God, and Asa begins to tear down the high places and these altars and these false gods. But 10 years or more have passed at this point. And apparently they've found their way back into the nation, or maybe we'd even say some of them weren't even destroyed. And so he says, hey, listen, you can't give up. You got to be you got to be courageous as a leader, as the king, in order to do what God is calling you to do, in order to lead the way God would have you to lead, in order to basically respond and go through these spiritual, these. Well, I went blank on what word I'm using. But anyway, what I'm looking for, not using the word I'm looking for. But he's challenging them. And he's mostly challenging Asa. This is what you have to do as the king. And so you get to verse 8 and you notice Asa's response. Because look what verse 8 says. As soon as Asa heard these words, the prophecy of Azariah, the son of Oded, your translation there may just say the prophecy of Oded. So it seems that Oded, or Azariah's, whose the father is Oded, that Oded also was a prophet. It says, he took courage and he put away the detestable idols from all the land of Judah and Benjamin and from the cities that he had taken in the hill country of Ephraim. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the vestibule of the house of the Lord. So Asa's response to this is, we're going to remove these idols. We started this process years ago, but we're going to finish this. We're going to remove these detestable, the ESV says, these detestable idols from the land. And in the process, we're going to repair the altar of the Lord. Apparently, the altar of the Lord had been damaged and no one had thought to fix it. So he says, this is what we're going to do. But then look at verse 9. And he gathered together all Judah and Benjamin and those from Ephraim and Manasseh and Simeon who were residing with them, for great numbers had deserted to him from Israel when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. He gathers the people together. And what's interesting is he gathers Benjamin and Judah, which makes sense because he's the king of Judah. But then you read about these other people. Who are the other people? You've got people from the north, from the northern kingdom. And what have they done? Yeah, they basically defected from the north, from Israel, and they joined the south. And the reason is because the Lord was with him, because Asa was following the Lord. If you remember, you got 19 kings of Israel, and how many are good? 0, not a 1. And sometimes I think we can read that and we think about all the troubles that Israel had and all the things that the people did. Well, there was no good people in Israel. No, there were still good people. This is going to be that faithful remnant that's going to, go into captivity and come back from captivity. But they were from the north because they defected, they left, they gave up, turned their back, whatever you want to call it. They left the north and they moved down to the south because, hey, they're following God, at least at this point in time. Now, not every king is going to follow God. But at this point, hey, that's what we're going to do. We're going to follow God. So he gathers all the people together. Then look at verse 11. What's verse 11 tell us? What do? Yeah, they made this sacrifice, this substantial sacrifice, 700 oxen and 7,000 sheep. It says from the spoil that they had gotten, probably from their war with the Ethiopians. Hey, this doesn't belong to us. This belongs to God. And so they make these sacrifices back to God. And notice the response here of the people, right? Verse 12 first, before we get to the response. What's verse 12 say they did? They entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God, their fathers. Notice this next part. What's it say? With all their heart and with all their soul. Right? So they make this covenant, hey, we're going to seek God, because that's what we're called to do, but not just with part of our hearts. We're going to do it with all of our heart and with all of our soul. Jesus would later say, hey, you want to love God? How do you have to love God? With all your heart and with all your soul. Right? That's what you have to do. Now notice how serious they take this. Verse 13. But whoever would not seek the Lord God of Israel should put to death, whether young or old, man or woman. And they swore the oath to the Lord with a loud voice, with shouting, with trumpets, and with horns. In other words, they were rejoicing. They were celebrating because the covenant had been made. Hey, we're going to seek God. But if you didn't seek God, if you weren't on board, what was going to happen? It's going to be a death penalty. And sometimes you look at that and think, well, that's kind of harsh, right? I mean, just because, I get being faithful to God, but you're going to kill them if they're not, if they don't want to follow along and commit to this covenant, if they don't want to seek after God, you kill them? Yeah. Why? It was what? Yeah.
Plus, their weakness could eventually seep back in.
Okay, you got the evil influence, right? That they could corrupt. But ultimately, hey, if we're going to renew this covenant, if we're going to make this covenant with God, remember the covenant that God made with Israel in the very beginning? You go back and read about that covenant that God made, and you read Exodus 22, verse 20, and also there in Deuteronomy 13 and in Deuteronomy 17. And you know what God says? If anyone among you tries to get you to follow another God, you know what you're supposed to do? You take them out and stone them. So we're going to be faithful to God. We're going to do what God called us to do from the very beginning. That's what we want to enter this covenant, so we're going to do it God's way. So if you're not on board, you're going to get the result that God told us to give in the very beginning, from the beginning of this covenant. So all of Judah rejoiced, verse 15. Swore with their hearts, they sought him with all their whole desires, and he was found by them, and the Lord gave them rest all around. But then look at verse 16. Even Micaiah, his mother, King Asa removed from being queen mother because she had made a detestable image for Asherah. So Asa cut down her image, he crushed it, and he burned it into the brook of Kidron. So basically, he removes the queen mother. Now, your translation may say Asa's mother. It may say Asa's grandmother. It seems to me that it's his grandmother it's talking about here. And I'll tell you why. Why is because when you look at 2 Chronicles 11, you read about this woman being married to, being the wife of Rehoboam, his favorite wife, and she bears him a son, Ahijah. Ahijah becomes the next king, and Asa's father is Ahijah. So that would make this lady his grandmother, not his mother. But the reason it says mother could be because of the role of the queen mother. Okay, the queen mother, to us, it doesn't make you think, oh, the king. He's like, it's the king. But the queen mother was a pretty important position. In fact, you see it, I think, 4 different times in the Hebrew text where it talks about there being a queen mother. And 2 Kings 2 is one of those references. After David dies, Solomon takes the throne. But then it says in verse 19, he sets a throne on his right for his mother Bathsheba. She becomes the queen mother, right? You see other examples. You got 2 Kings chapter 11, Athaliah, the evil woman, and you think, how did she get control of the kingdom? I'll tell you how she got control of the kingdom. She was the queen mother, and when her son died, she took control. That's what happened. That shows you the power and the influence that the queen mother had. And so here is Ahijah's mom, his grandmother, who's still reigning and ruling as queen mother when Asa comes to the throne, when Asa is king. But when he decides, hey, enough is enough, we're gonna do what God says, he goes and finds dear old mom, grandmother. Using the word mother there makes sense just because the terminology, queen mother, and he removes her. He removes her from her position. And he takes her idol, her pillar, and he burns it and throws it into the brook. And he demonstrates there that it's more important to be faithful to God than to make your family happy, to be pleasing to your family. Because he takes her from that position and says, no, you're not doing right. And as you read the rest of the chapter, basically we find out that all the high places don't come down. I mean, Asa can only do what Asa can do, obviously. But there's no more war until the 35th year of the reign. And we probably will pick up with that next week. We'll see. But when you think about Asa, here's the lesson I really want to leave you with. Reform starts with courageous leadership. Azariah comes to the king and basically tells the king, hey, you've got to do something. It starts with courageous leaders, and that's what it's going to take for us in the world we live in today. So, all right, well, I'd say we'll be back to normal next week, but no promises. So we'll see you Sunday morning, or we will be back to normal.